I see a lot of people in the comment section of my videos and also the comment section of other videos who don't understand why people like myself and others continue to talk about Anthony Joshua. They think that Anthony Joshua was a hype job all along, a protected fighter who was never any good. He was just a creation of Matchroom, but he was never the real deal. And now that he's been exposed, people should just basically forget him, throw him by the wayside, leave him to just be a has-been. That's their attitude on it. Well, I can only speak from my perspective. First of all, Anthony Joshua is still a very popular fighter. So as a YouTuber, I'm gonna make videos about popular fighters for obvious reasons, right? That equals views for me and money in the bank. I'm just being real. But that's not the only reason. Anthony Joshua, as far as I'm concerned, has not yet fulfilled his physical potential. Now, there's a difference between physical potential and mental potential, because some fighters have the mindset to be elite. They might not have the physical ability to be elite, but they've got the right mindset. Dillian Whyte is one of those guys. Dillian Whyte doesn't have elite level physical talent at all, okay? When I say talent, I mean the athleticism, the coordination, the balance, all these kind of things. He can box, he's got a good boxing brain, but Dillian Whyte is clumsy, slow-footed, poor coordination, doesn't have a great chin as we've seen. But in terms of his mindset, he's definitely got an elite mindset. Very, very strong-willed, and he can bounce back from defeats. He doesn't look like a traumatized individual when he gets back in there against somebody who just knocked him out the fight previous. Go and have a look at his rematch with Alexander Povetkin to see evidence of that. So, yeah, he's someone with an elite mindset without having the elite physical ability. Anthony Joshua is kind of the opposite, at least the way I see it. He doesn't have an elite mentality, but in terms of his physical attributes, it's all there. The human mind is usually more malleable. It's more moldable than the human body. With the human body, there's more limitations than there is with the mind. So when you see a guy who has maybe some mental obstacles that he has to overcome, you tend to think that that is somehow achievable. If Anthony Joshua was a 5'10", slow-footed heavyweight, you wouldn't give him much shot at all. If he'd been knocked out, by Andy Ruiz and lost a bunch of fights and he's a 5'10", slow-footed heavyweight, you'd be saying, forget about him. But because he's 6'6", athletic, he's got pretty quick feet, quick hands, can punch well in combination, can move around well. Yeah, because he has all these things, you think, well, if he can get his mind right, he can still be a factor in the heavyweight division. That's the way I see it. And I've always been someone who wants to see fighters fulfill their potential. If they have talent, I find it very frustrating when they don't make the most of that talent. Now, longtime subscribers may remember that way back in the days, I was calling for David Haye and George Groves to actually leave Adam Booth. And my reason for this was because they were underdeveloped in certain aspects of their game. Neither one of them could fight on the inside. I remember when George Groves I believe he got dropped. He certainly got hurt by that Scottish fighter, Kenny Anderson. And after that, I was like, no, he's got to leave Adam Booth. He just can't fight on the inside at all. I looked at someone like George Groves and I thought, if you taught him the right way, he would be able to handle himself on the inside a lot better. But Booth clearly doesn't have the ability, doesn't have the know-how to teach him those skills. You see, and that's because I saw talent in George Groves. I saw the fact that he was fast. I saw the fact that he was explosive. He could punch. And so I wanted to see those attributes used in the best possible way. Same situation with David Haye. I got frustrated with the fact that Haye was kind of a bit basic as a fighter. Now, some people might think, whoa, what do you mean by basic? David Haye was an ambush fighter. He was a guy who didn't really box with you. And when I mean box, I mean he didn't engage in, I throw this punch, you duck or roll, and then come back with this shot, and then I throw this punch in response, that kind of thing. David Haye's whole game was to stay completely outside for the most part. And when he saw you reaching in, when he saw you off balance, When he saw your guard slip for a second, he'd beat you to the shot or dive in with a shot. Lead off. That was David Haye's whole game for the most part. Quite basic. It was based on athleticism, because to be successful fighting that way, you have to be fast. You have to have quick reflexes. It's not the most technical style. It's an athletic style. And I felt as though if you taught David Haye more actual boxing technique, rather than have him rely on reflexes and athleticism. And by the way, that style was patterned largely off Roy Jones, who, again, a freak athlete, a phenomenal fighter. But once Roy Jones's speed and athleticism started to wane, he started to get knocked out all over the place. He didn't have the solid fundamentals to fall back on that people like Bernard Hopkins did. And so with David Haye, I always felt like, well, for one, he's not anywhere near as athletically gifted as Roy Jones, who is. But two, you look at his dimensions. 6'3", naturally kind of a lanky guy. I saw him maybe with the Kronk style, or at least learning some aspects of the Kronk style, and how much of a more rounded fighter he could have been if he had that in his arsenal. Not that he needed to fight in a Kronk style every fight, but I just looked at David Haye and thought, what would Manny Stewart do with this guy? He'd get him to use his jab a lot more. He'd get him to whip in left hooks to the body, Tommy Hearns style a lot more. And look, maybe I would have been wrong about how well David Haye would have done if they taught him to be a bit more technical rather than relying on his athleticism all the time. Because at the end of the day, David Haye didn't have the greatest chin in the world. So maybe the ambush style was better for him because it minimizes the amount of shots he's taking. So, that's another story. But the point is, I want to see fighters fulfill their potential. It's always been like this with me. And people do take it the wrong way sometimes. Like with David Haye, people will say, oh, you must hate Adam Booth. And, various other things. No, I've got nothing against Adam Booth. I actually like Adam Booth. Over the years, I've learned more about him as a person. And over this past couple years, I've really started to respect and admire this guy as a human being. But from a boxing perspective, right, never mind who I like or don't like, from a boxing perspective, at that time, and Adam Booth, I think, has improved as a trainer since. But from a boxing perspective, I just saw things in Haye and Groves that were missing, and I wanted them to fulfill their potential. So I've always wanted to see fighters reach their potential, do the best that they possibly can with their physical attributes. And Anthony Joshua is no different. So that's one of the main reasons that I still talk about him and make videos about him, because I want to see him make the most out of what he has. I mean, imagine if Anthony Joshua had Tyson, in fact, never mind Tyson Fury's mindset. Imagine if Anthony Joshua had the mental strength and the determination of Derek Chisora or Dillian Whyte. He'd be a different guy, right? I mean, he'd be a different fighter, should I say. Yeah, his chin wouldn't be any better, but I think that the mentality would get him through a lot of fights, and he'd be able to apply the physical attributes more effectively if he had that level of confidence and that kind of dogged determination that those fighters have. He'd have a higher risk tolerance in the ring if he had the mentality and the mindset of those guys. Maybe not necessarily recklessness, but just confidence to throw the shots that need to be thrown. If he had the mentality of a Dillian Whyte, he wouldn't have looked anxious in that Andy Ruiz rematch, would he? I mean, compare Dillian Whyte when he fought Povetkin the second time to Anthony Joshua when he fought Andy Ruiz the second time. It's night and day in terms of who looked more confident. Dillian Whyte was way more confident in the Povetkin rematch than AJ was in the Ruiz rematch. And I know that Ruiz was a much younger guy and he had a lot more in the tank than, a much older Povetkin. I get that. But again, Dillian Whyte had been knocked out with one punch. Anthony Joshua didn't get knocked out with one punch. It at least took several rounds for Ruiz to wear him out and take him out. Wear him down and take him out, should I say. But again, AJ was still a deer in the headlights. That's the way he looked to me. In the Andy Ruiz rematch, he obviously won the fight and got the decision and all that. But yeah, he just seemed very anxious to me and scared to get hit. Whereas with Dillian Whyte, there was none of that. You see? So however good Anthony Joshua could be, I'm not saying even with the strongest mentality in the world that he'd be the best heavyweight in the world, necessarily. But he'd be better than he is now. That's one thing I can say. It'd be better than he is now, and that would produce more entertainment for me as a boxing fan. Think what you want about Anthony Joshua in terms of how good he is or how good he isn't. He's been entertaining, hasn't he? I mean, even the first Andy Ruiz fight, was that not entertaining? That was a great heavyweight fight. Both guys on the canvas. I mean, the third round was a great round. AJ drops Ruiz. Ruiz looks kind of shell-shocked. First time I think he's been down amateur or pro, gets up, decks AJ within seconds. I mean, that was a great round. You know, we'll look back in the future at these moments and we'll say, wow, these were great fights. Right now, we don't actually appreciate, or a lot of other people don't appreciate, how entertaining the heavyweight division is and how good it is right now. But in years to come, people will appreciate it a lot more. AJ isn't someone that's taken a load of stick in terms of in the ring, right? He's had 2 fights where he got beat up against Andy Ruiz and in the Klitschko fight, let's be real. He took a beating in that fight too. But other than that, he hasn't really taken a lot of punishment in fights. Yeah, he took a few in the Usyk, first and second Usyk fights towards the end, but it was nothing too crazy. It's only really 2 fights where he got beat up. So he's relatively fresh, whatever age he is now. Is he 33? He's still relatively fresh. Not that many miles on the clock in boxing terms. So it's a big if, but if they can get his mind right, then I think he can go on to have some good wins in the future. We'll see. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you're tired of the biased narratives and mass censorship on mainstream platforms, and you want to be part of a community of critical thinkers who love free speech just as much as you do, then come and join me on Patreon and access my weekly no-holds-barred, censorship-free podcast where we lift the lid on a wide variety of controversial topics. It's not mainstream friendly, it's not politically correct, but that's the whole point. We dare to stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. Just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called Hatman Hot Topics. You'll gain access to a minimum of 2 hours of exclusive content every single week, including podcasts, videos, interviews, live stream Q&As, as well as my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. Not to mention a vast back catalog of hundreds of hours of previous episodes. You can listen via the Patreon app with the option to download in high quality MP3. We've also got an Element group where you can come and chat and hang out with myself and other members. Unlike Discord, it has full end-to-end encryption, is decentralized, and is 100% censorship free. You can also send voice notes as well as much larger audio and video files than you can on Discord. So come and sign up on Patreon. There's no contract, there's no commitment, you can cancel at any time, and it's cheaper than a cup of coffee. So I'll see you over there. I'm out.